Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Today's story is called The Nurse Who Fell for Her Patient's Brother. Now, let us return to our main character. The fluorescent lights of St. James Memorial Hospital hummed softly as Clara and Gwyn hurried down the long, polished hallway. It was nearly midnight, and the air smelled faintly of antiseptic and cold coffee. She was used to late shifts, but tonight felt different, tense, heavy, as if something important was about to happen. A senior nurse had called her to the VIP floor, the place reserved for the kind of patients whose names appeared in business magazines, not on medical charts. When she pushed open the glass door to suite 702, she froze. Inside, a tall man in a charcoal suit stood beside the window, the city lights behind him painting a silver edge around his frame. His posture was straight, his presence sharp. He turned, his eyes dark and unreadable. "You are Clara and Gwyn?" She nodded, clutching her clipboard like a shield. "Yes, sir. I was told you requested me?" The man's voice was calm, deep, and carried a weight that made her chest tighten. "I am Ethan Carter. My brother is your patient in room 704. He is in a coma after the accident last week." Clara swallowed. Of course, Grant Carter, the young heir of Carter Biotech. She had seen the headlines but never imagined she would be caring for him. "I am very sorry, Mr. Carter," she said softly. "Your brother's condition is stable, but recovery will take time." Ethan's gaze lingered on her for a moment, assessing, calculating. Then he said something she never expected. "I need your help with something unusual." Clara frowned. "Unusual?" He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "My family and the board are in chaos. The press is circling. If they discover Grant is unconscious and alone, the company's stock will collapse by morning." She blinked, unsure where this was going. "What do you need me to do?" Ethan's jaw tightened. "I need someone the media will believe is close to him, someone loyal, discreet. Someone who can stand by him in public until he wakes up." The air between them thickened. "You want me to be his nurse," she said carefully. "You already are," Ethan replied. "I need you to be more than that. I need you to be his fiancé." The word hit her like a cold shock. "His what?" He did not flinch. "Just a temporary arrangement. A private contract between you and me. You will attend 3 public events as his fiancé and maintain the appearance until he recovers. You will be compensated generously." Clara shook her head in disbelief. "Mr. Carter, that is impossible. I am a nurse, not an actress." He reached into his coat pocket, placing a slim envelope on the counter. Inside was a check, one that could erase her student loans, her mother's hospital bills, and still leave enough to breathe again. 3 months, Ethan said quietly. "No one gets hurt. You walk away debt-free." Her heart pounded in her chest. She thought of her mother, still recovering miles away, the unpaid medical treatments, the endless double shifts. This was wrong, unethical, but it could save everything she loved. She met his gaze, steady but trembling inside. "And if I say no?" Ethan's expression did not change. "Then I will find someone else." The silence stretched until she finally exhaled. "I will do it," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. His lips curved, not a smile, but something close. "Good. You start tomorrow. My lawyer will deliver the contract at dawn." Clara watched him leave, her mind spinning, her pulse echoing in her ears. She had no idea that tonight, by saying yes to a stranger in a suit, she had signed more than a contract. She had signed the beginning of a story that would change her life forever. The next morning, sunlight filtered through the blinds of Clara's small apartment, striping the walls with pale gold. She had not slept at all. The envelope from Ethan Carter lay on her kitchen table like a weight she could not lift. Her coffee had gone cold hours ago, untouched. Every time she closed her eyes, she heard his voice again, calm, confident, impossible to ignore. By 7:30, a knock echoed through the door. A man in a gray suit stood outside, holding a thin black folder. "Miss Nguyen?" he asked. "I am Mr. Carter's attorney. May I come in?" Clara hesitated, then nodded. He opened the folder and laid the contract on the table. The legal language blurred before her eyes. "This document outlines the terms of your temporary engagement," he explained. 3 months, confidentiality absolute, compensation as stated. Both parties agree to maintain the appearance of a romantic relationship until the expiration date. Clara's hands trembled as she signed. The lawyer gathered the papers, bowed slightly, and left without another word. The silence after the door clicked shut felt enormous. That afternoon, a black sedan waited outside the hospital for her. The driver held the door and said politely, "Mr. Carter is expecting you." She sat in the back seat, heart pounding, the city blurring past the tinted glass. When they arrived at the Carter residence, a gated estate overlooking the river, her breath caught. The mansion looked more like a museum than a home, with white stone columns and a fountain that sparkled in the sunlight. Inside, Ethan waited in the grand foyer, his suit immaculate, his demeanor as composed as ever. "You are punctual," he said. Clara forced a small smile. "Nurses have to be." He gestured toward a side hall. "Come. There is something you need to learn before tonight." She followed him through corridors lined with portraits and marble floors that echoed with their footsteps. They entered a large room where a woman in a tailored skirt and clipboard stood ready. "This is Julia, our etiquette consultant," Ethan said. "She will help you learn how to carry yourself at the charity gala this evening." Clara blinked. "Tonight?" "Yes," Ethan replied. "It will be your first public appearance as Grant's fiancée," Julia offered a warm but professional smile. "Do not worry, Miss Nguyen. We will make you shine." For the next 3 hours, Clara learned how to walk in heels that pinched her toes, how to smile just enough, how to shake hands without trembling. She stumbled through every lesson, flushing each time she made a mistake. Ethan watched silently from the corner of the room, arms crossed, unreadable. When Julia finally left, Clara leaned against a chair, exhausted. "I am a nurse, not a debutante," she muttered. Ethan handed her a glass of water. "You will adapt. You always do." She looked up, startled by the faint softness in his tone, but before she could reply, his phone buzzed. He turned away to answer, his expression hardening again. "Yes, the press will be there. Make sure they get the story straight. Grant Carter is still engaged. Nothing has changed." His words sliced through her. She was a tool, a temporary illusion to protect his company. When he hung up, she asked quietly, "And what if someone asks about me?" "About us?" Ethan looked at her for a long moment. "Then you smile," he said, "and you play the part." Hours later, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Clara stood before a mirror in a pale blue evening gown that Julia had chosen. The reflection staring back did not look like a nurse. She looked like someone who belonged to another world, Ethan's world. Her hair framed her face softly, her lips painted a shade she had never dared to wear. The door opened, and Ethan entered, adjusting his cufflinks. For a brief moment, his gaze faltered. "You look," he began, then stopped himself. "Presentable." Clara smiled faintly. "Thank you, Mr. Carter." "Ethan," he corrected. "Tonight, you call me Ethan." She nodded, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. As they walked out together, the night air was cool, the sound of cameras already waiting beyond the gates. Her pulse raced. She whispered, "What if they see through it?" Ethan leaned close enough for her to feel his breath. Then we make them believe harder. The car door closed, sealing her inside a world she never asked for, but could no longer escape. And somewhere deep down, a small voice whispered that pretending might become the most dangerous thing she had ever done. The ballroom glittered with chandeliers and soft jazz, the kind of place where conversations were wrapped in laughter and the scent of expensive perfume. Cameras flashed as Ethan guided Clara through the entrance, his hand steady on the small of her back. Every head turned. She felt hundreds of eyes following her, whispering behind champagne glasses. "Smile," Ethan murmured under his breath. "And remember, you belong here." She forced herself to breathe, lifting her chin as reporters called out questions. "Mr. Carter, is this your brother's fiancé? How is Grant's recovery going?" Ethan answered smoothly, "Grant is in excellent hands, and yes, this is Clara." He turned toward her, his gaze softening just enough for the cameras. "We are grateful for everyone's prayers." Clara smiled, rehearsed but gentle, and nodded as flashes erupted like lightning. Inside, the sound of a string quartet filled the air. Waiters glided by with trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres she could not pronounce. Julia's lessons echoed in her head. Posture straight, smile polite, never grip the glass too tightly. Ethan introduced her to investors, board members, and socialites whose smiles were sharp as their diamonds. She answered politely, her voice steady though her stomach churned. "You are doing well," Ethan whispered between introductions. "Just keep it up." But as the night wore on, the questions shifted. A woman with a crimson dress and curious eyes approached. "So, Clara," she said sweetly, "how did you and Grant meet?" Clara froze. Ethan's warning look came too late. "At the hospital," she said truthfully, then hesitated. "He was visiting a friend." The woman's smile thinned. "How romantic," she said, turning away, her tone laced with doubt. Clara's pulse quickened. She reached for a glass of water, but her hand shook, spilling a few drops on the white linen tablecloth. A man laughed lightly nearby. "Nervous, Miss Nguyen?" he teased. Ethan's jaw tightened. "That is enough," he said, his voice low but cutting. The man paled and muttered an apology. Clara glanced at Ethan, but he was already turning toward the stage where a charity auction was beginning. His world was ruthless, and for the first time, she understood the weight he carried. When the speeches ended, they escaped to the terrace, the cold night air brushing against their skin. Clara gripped the stone railing, her heart still racing. "I made a fool of myself," she said softly. "You did not," Ethan replied, standing beside her. "You handled yourself better than most people in that room." "They saw through me," she whispered. "They saw a nurse pretending to be someone she is not." He looked at her then, his voice low. "Let them see what they want. You are the only one who knows why you are here." She met his eyes, searching for something behind that calm exterior. "And why are you here, Ethan? For the company? For your image? Or for your brother?" He hesitated, his jaw working as if holding back the truth. "For all of it," he said finally, "and for him." A gust of wind caught her hair, and without thinking, he reached out, tucking it behind her ear. The moment lingered too long. His fingers brushed her cheek before he pulled back, the mask returning. "We should go. The photographers will notice." Inside, the music swelled again, the illusion continuing. Yet something had shifted. Clara's heart beat faster, not from fear, but from confusion. When the gala finally ended, the car ride back was quiet. The city lights streaked by in silence. Clara watched Ethan's reflection in the window, strong, composed, and impossibly distant. At the gates of the mansion, she stepped out first, the night air cool against her skin. "Good night, Mr. Carter," she said formally. He paused before replying. "Ethan," he corrected again, softer this time. "Good night, Clara." She turned away, unaware that behind her, he lingered at the doorway, watching until she disappeared inside. In the stillness of the grand hall, Ethan exhaled slowly. For the first time in years, the weight in his chest felt heavier and it had nothing to do with business. Days passed after the gala, but Clara could still feel the echo of that night, the lights, the whispers, and the strange electricity that lingered between her and Ethan. Her shifts at the hospital resumed, yet everything felt different now. Nurses whispered when she passed by, glancing at the tabloid headlines that showed her and Ethan side by side under glittering chandeliers. Engaged to a Carter, one headline read. Clara wanted to hide, but professionalism kept her upright. Every morning, she checked on Grant Carter, Ethan's brother, still lying motionless beneath the soft hum of machines. She adjusted his monitored his pulse, and spoke to him softly as if he could hear. You must be tired of all this silence, she murmured. Your brother acts like the world rests on his shoulders. She smiled faintly, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Someone should tell him it is all right to rest sometimes. One afternoon, as she left the ICU, Ethan appeared in the hallway, tall and immaculate as always. How is he? He asked. Stable, she replied. No significant change. He nodded, his gaze shifting toward the room, but something in his expression seemed distant, almost weary. There is a board meeting tonight, he said finally. I need you to accompany me, it is part of the agreement. Clara hesitated. Another event? Not quite, he said. But they will expect to see us together. That evening, the Carter Biotech headquarters gleamed under fluorescent lights. Clara stood beside Ethan in the glass-walled conference room as executives murmured greetings. She recognized a few faces from the gala, same sharp smiles, the same appraising eyes. One of them, Mr. Latham, smirked. Ah. The famous fiancé, Grant has good taste. His tone dripped with mockery. Ethan's jaw tightened. That is enough, he said coldly. The room fell silent. Throughout the meeting, Clara sat quietly, pretending to follow the discussions about stock values and research milestones. But she noticed Ethan's hands clenched under the table, his composure cracking at the edges. When it ended, she followed him to his office, a sleek space lined with city views and quiet tension. You should not let them talk to you that way, she said softly. They do not matter, he replied, loosening his tie. They only see what they want. Then show them something else, she said. He looked at her, almost surprised, as if no one had ever challenged him like that. Why do you care? Because you care, she said simply. Even when you pretend you do not. For a moment, silence filled the room, the city lights flickering across his face. Then, almost reluctantly, he laughed, a quiet, tired sound that broke through his cold exterior. You are impossible, he said. And you are predictable, she replied. He stared at her, then looked away, the corner of his mouth curving just slightly. Later that night, as he drove her home, rain began to fall, tapping softly against the windshield. You could stay at the mansion, he said suddenly. It would be easier. Safer from the press. You mean more believable, she said, her voice even. That too. She hesitated, then nodded. Fine. But I still go to work every day. No bodyguards, no special treatment. Agreed, he said. The next morning, Clara moved into the guest wing of the Carter estate. The house was silent, too large for comfort, filled with portraits of people who never smiled. Each evening, Ethan returned late, sometimes finding her in the garden reading medical journals by the fountain. They began to talk not about contracts or appearances, but about real things, about their families, about loss, about how both of them had learned to hide pain behind responsibility. One evening, as they stood by the fountain, the soft glow of garden lights danced across the water. You are not what I expected, Ethan said quietly. Neither are you, Clara replied. He looked at her then, not as an employee or a placeholder, but as someone who had somehow slipped past his defenses. She met his gaze, and for the first time, neither of them looked away. The sound of crickets filled the silence, and the line between what was fake and what was real began to blur in the most dangerous way. The days inside the Carter mansion fell into a rhythm that neither of them expected. Every morning, Clara left for the hospital before dawn, her nurse's uniform crisp, her heart heavy with the strange dual life she was living. By night, she returned to the grand house that was not her home but looked more like a gilded cage. Ethan often worked late, and when he did appear, it was usually with a tired expression and a loosened tie. Yet slowly, almost quietly, something changed between them. One evening, Clara found him in the library, staring at a photograph of two young boys on a fishing boat. "That is Grant and me," he said when she approached. His voice was softer than she had ever heard it. "Our father took that picture before the company consumed everything." She studied him for a moment. "You miss those days?" "I miss what we used to be," he said. "Before every decision had a price." The silence between them deepened, filled with unspoken memories. For the first time, Ethan seemed less like a CEO and more like a man searching for something he had lost. "You know," she said gently, "your brother would not want you to carry it all alone." He looked at her, something raw flickering behind his eyes. "You talk as if you knew him." "I have taken care of him long enough to know he is fighting," she replied. "You just stopped believing." That night, as Clara prepared tea in the kitchen, she noticed Ethan standing at the doorway, watching her. "You really do not stop, do you?" he said. "What do you mean?" "Caring," he answered. "You care for people who cannot even thank you for it." She smiled faintly. "That is what nurses do." He took the cup from her hands, their fingers brushing for a second too long. The air between them tightened, fragile and electric. Neither spoke. Instead, Ethan turned away, exhaling as if the weight of restraint had become unbearable. Over the next few days, their interactions became gentler, quieter. Sometimes they shared breakfast, sometimes silence. When Ethan left for meetings, he began saying, "See you tonight," instead of nothing at all. Clara found herself looking forward to those words more than she wanted to admit. One Saturday, he surprised her by suggesting they visit the hospital together. "It might look more convincing if people see us supporting Grant," he explained, but his tone lacked the usual cold calculation. At the hospital, Ethan stood beside the bed for the first time since the accident. The rhythmic beeping filled the silence. "He looks peaceful," he whispered. "He is strong," Clara said. "He will wake up." Ethan glanced at her, his voice low. "You sound certain." "Because I have to be," she replied. "Hope is the only medicine we cannot measure, but it works more often than science admits." Ethan's lips twitched into the faintest smile. When they returned home that evening, the mansion felt different, less empty, as if something unseen had shifted. As they walked through the hallway, Clara's heel caught on the rug, and she stumbled. Ethan caught her instantly, his hand firm at her waist. For a moment, the world stilled. Their eyes met, and the air thickened with something neither could name. His voice dropped to a whisper. "You should be careful." "You were there to catch me," she replied softly. "Maybe I wanted to be," he said before stepping back, his composure cracking just enough for her to see the truth. That night, Clara lay awake staring at the ceiling, her mind replaying every word, every glance. What started as a contract now felt dangerously real. She thought about his kindness hidden behind pride, his quiet laughter, the rare softness in his eyes. She was falling for a man who had promised her this would never be real, and she knew that when the contract ended, her heart would not walk away as easily as her signature had. Autumn crept quietly over the city, painting the trees outside the Carter mansion in shades of amber and gold. Inside, the world felt calmer than it had in months. Ethan and Clara had settled into an unspoken rhythm that blurred the lines between truth and illusion. Some evenings, they dined together without discussing business, their laughter echoing softly through the empty halls. Other nights, they simply shared silence, the kind that felt peaceful rather than awkward. One evening, Clara found Ethan sitting alone on the terrace, a tumbler of whiskey in his hand and the skyline stretching endlessly ahead. "You work too much," she said as she stepped beside him. "You should rest before you burn out." He glanced at her with a tired smile. You sound like my brother used to. Then maybe you should listen, she replied, leaning on the railing beside him. You cannot fix everything alone. He took a long breath, his eyes distant. When my father died, I promised I would protect this company and my family. But somewhere along the way, I forgot what family even meant. Clara turned toward him. You have not forgotten. You have just been afraid to remember. Ethan met her gaze, and something inside him seemed to give way. Clara, he said quietly, when all this began, I thought you were just convenient. Someone who would make a scandal disappear. But now, he stopped, the words caught in his throat. Now I do not know how to go back to who I was before you. Her breath caught. The night felt still, charged. Ethan, she began, but before she could finish, his phone buzzed on the table. The spell broke. He picked it up, his expression hardening instantly. It is the hospital, he said, standing abruptly. Grant's condition, something has changed. Within minutes, they were rushing through the sterile corridors of St. James Memorial. The rhythmic beeping from Grant's monitor had quickened, erratic but alive. Doctors and nurses moved swiftly around the bed, checking his vitals. Clara stepped closer, her heart pounding. He is responding, she said, watching the faint flicker of movement in Grant's fingers. Ethan gripped the bed rail, disbelief and hope colliding in his eyes. Grant, he whispered, if you can hear me, it is me. It is Ethan. The tension in the room hung like a breath waiting to be released. Then, slowly, Grant's eyelids fluttered open. Clara gasped softly, tears stinging her eyes. He is waking up, she said. The monitors steadied, the beeping rhythmic once more. Ethan's voice broke as he said his brother's name again. Grant's lips moved weakly. Ethan? It was barely audible, but it was enough. Clara felt her throat tighten. She had witnessed countless recoveries in her career, but never one that felt this personal. When the doctors cleared the room, Ethan turned to her, his voice rough with emotion. You did this, he said. You never gave up on him. She shook her head. He fought his way back. I just stood beside him. But Ethan stepped closer, his gaze steady. No, Clara. You are the reason I did not lose hope. The weight of his words pressed against her chest, warm and terrifying. Ethan, she said softly, this is not part of the contract. I know, he said. That is exactly why it matters. For a moment, everything else disappeared, the machines, the hospital walls, the endless noise of duty and fear. All that remained was the truth neither of them could keep pretending away. Yet as the reality of Grant's awakening set in, so did the fragile reminder that their arrangement was built on a lie. The world would soon know that Grant Carter was alive and conscious. The reason for their pretend engagement would vanish overnight. Clara looked down at the engagement ring Ethan had given her, a glittering symbol of everything false and everything that had somehow become real. She knew that soon, one of them would have to let go first, and she prayed it would not break them both when it happened. Grant's recovery spread through the media like wildfire. Within a week, headlines filled every business channel, Carter Era awakens, Carter Industries rebounds overnight. Cameras crowded outside the hospital, reporters shouting questions about the miraculous recovery and the mysterious woman always seen beside the brothers. For Clara, the joy of Grant's awakening was bittersweet. Her purpose in the Carter family had ended the moment his eyes opened. The contract that once held her close to Ethan was now meaningless. She watched him move through the hospital corridors surrounded by lawyers, reporters, and executives, his focus entirely on the company once more. It should have made her proud, but instead it hollowed something inside her. That night, she returned to the mansion to pack her things. The guest room that once felt too large now seemed smaller, suffocating. As she folded her uniform into a suitcase, a knock echoed at the door. Ethan stood there, still in his suit, his expression unreadable. You are leaving, he said quietly. It is time, she replied. Grant is awake, and your world does not need me anymore. He stepped closer. You think that was all you were to me? It was what we agreed, she said, forcing her voice steady. 3 months. A contract. Nothing more. He exhaled sharply, frustration breaking through his calm. Clara, nothing about you has been nothing. She turned away, her heart twisting. Do not make this harder than it already is, Ethan. You have your family back. Your company is safe. And her voice caught, I just want to leave before it hurts more. Ethan hesitated, then said softly, you are running away because it already does. His words hit too close to the truth. She closed her suitcase, refusing to look at him. Goodbye, Ethan, she whispered. When the door shut behind her, it felt final. The city outside was cold and unfamiliar. Clara rented a small apartment near the hospital and threw herself back into work, pretending she had not left a part of herself behind. Days turned into weeks. She saw Ethan's name in headlines, but never once did he call. Still, every time she passed a newsstand or heard a story about the Carter Foundation, her chest ached. One afternoon, as she finished her shift, a nurse handed her an envelope. This came for you, she said. The letter inside was simply no company seal, no signature. Just a single line in familiar handwriting, meet me at the gallery, Saturday at 6. Clara's heart skipped. She almost tore the note apart, but something deeper, something stubborn made her hold on. Saturday came, and she found herself standing in front of the Carter Art Gallery, its lights glowing softly through the evening mist. She hesitated at the door, uncertain whether to walk in. Part of her wanted to turn back. But her hands moved before her thoughts could catch up, and the glass door swung open. Inside, the air smelled faintly of paint and roses. And on the far wall, she saw something that made her breath stop completely, a framed canvas, delicate and breathtaking, titled The Art of Clara Nguyen. Her heart pounded as she realized this was not just an exhibition. It was a message. Clara stood frozen in the quiet gallery, her eyes tracing the strokes of the painting that bore her name. It was not a portrait, but a memory captured on canvas, the hospital window, sunlight spilling across her sketchbook, the faint outline of a nurse's hand reaching for hope. She had drawn that once, long ago, and only Ethan could have remembered. Footsteps echoed behind her. You came, Ethan said, his voice soft but certain. She turned, her pulse racing. He looked different, somehow less guarded, more human. What is all this? She asked, her voice trembling. This, he said, glancing at the painting, is everything I could not say. Clara shook her head. You did not have to do this, Ethan. Our deal ended weeks ago. That is exactly why I did it, he said, stepping closer. You stood beside me when everyone else left. You believed in my brother when I had stopped. You made me see the difference between pretending and living. His voice faltered. When I realized you were gone, I saw how empty the mansion was. How meaningless all of it was without you. Clara's eyes burned, tears threatening to fall. You do not have to feel guilty, she said softly. I never expected anything. This is not guilt, Ethan interrupted. This is the truth I have been too proud to say. I love you, Clara. The words hung in the air, heavy and raw. For a long moment, neither moved. The world seemed to shrink until it was only them, surrounded by the soft hum of lights and the scent of roses. Clara swallowed hard. You cannot just say that after everything. After turning me into a headline, after letting me walk away. You are right, he said. I cannot erase what happened. But I can start by being honest. No contracts. No lies. Just me asking for a second chance. He took a deep breath and gestured toward the other side of the room. There, on a pedestal under a spotlight, lay the shredded remains of their old contract, framed beneath glass. I kept it, he said quietly. To remind myself of how much I lost by treating love like a business. Clara's tears finally fell, silent and steady. You are unbelievable, she whispered. Ethan smiled faintly. So are you. And I am hoping that maybe, just maybe, that is enough. She looked up at him, her voice breaking. What if I am still afraid? Then let me prove to you there is nothing to be afraid of, he said. He reached for her hand, his touch gentle, patient. For a heartbeat, she hesitated, her mind screaming that this was too much, too fast. But her heart, the same one that had learned to heal others, finally chose itself. She took his hand. The gallery lights dimmed slightly, as if the world understood something sacred had just been restored. Clara exhaled, the weight of months lifting from her chest. For the first time, the silence between them did not feel like distance. It felt like home. 6 months later, the Carter Art Gallery opened again, but this time not for business investors or socialites. The evening lights glowed warm and golden, illuminating the words engraved on the marble wall, "The Carter Healing Foundation." People gathered to celebrate its launch, a new project dedicated to funding medical programs and scholarships for nurses across the country. At the center of it all stood Clara, her white dress simple, elegant, her smile calm and steady. The cameras flashed, but she no longer flinched. This was not the world of contracts and lies anymore. This was real. Grant, still in recovery but stronger now, greeted her with a grin. You were the reason I woke up, he said. Ethan never admitted it, but I know. She laughed softly. You did the hard part, Grant. Maybe, he said, but you brought my brother back to life long before I opened my eyes. Clara's chest warmed as she looked toward Ethan, who stood at the edge of the stage, speaking to a group of donors. When his eyes found hers, the crowd around them disappeared. Later that night, after the speeches ended and the guests drifted away, Ethan approached her beneath the soft glow of the gallery lights. Do you remember the first time we stood here? He asked. She nodded, smiling. You said this place was everything you could not say. And tonight, he said quietly, it is where I will finally say everything. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small glass vial, the same one that once held the contract's remains. Inside now was a delicate silver ring. No contracts. No pretenses. Just a promise. Her breath caught as he knelt before her. Claire and Gwyn, he said, his voice steady but full of emotion, will you marry me, for real this time? For a moment, all she could do was stare at him through tears. Around them, the quiet hum of the gallery filled the air, the same place that had once held her pain now holding her answer. She nodded, her voice barely a whisper. Yes, Ethan. 1,000 times yes. The guests who remained erupted in applause as Ethan slipped the ring onto her finger and pulled her into his arms. The world outside might never understand their story, a nurse who became a fiancé, a contract that turned into a lifetime, but to them, it was simple. Two people who found each other in the chaos and chose truth over fear. Months later, their wedding was small, intimate, and beautiful. Grant walked her down the aisle, smiling proudly. As Ethan took her hands and whispered his vows, Clara realized how far they had come from that first night in the hospital when everything began as a lie. Now it was all real, their love, their purpose, their shared promise to build something that would outlast both of them. When they kissed, the guests cheered, but Ethan only whispered one thing against her ear, the same words that would become their truth forever. No contracts, no conditions, just us. And as the music swelled and the lights dimmed, Clara knew this was not the end of their story, but the beginning of the life they had both been searching for.